random person, Sab Nino here. Welcome back to another Sab Merch Odyssey. A little bit back, I made a video reviewing every SpongeBob Snap and Switch set. And since then, there's been a ton of new Snap and Switch sets. All of them are probably going to be very interesting to talk about. Snap and Switch is a machine, and there's no doubt in my mind that we'll probably get a part 3 after this video. So let's get started, shall we? First off, we have the TV. This is one of those display sets, kind of similar to the SpongeBob Popsicle. It reminds me a lot of a SpongeBob TV that I used to have as a kid, and the back of it has nothing interesting going on, and basically the display is a reference to the episode Hello Bikini Bottom, because here we have the bus Mr. Krabs stole and Colonel Carper, and these do come off, and I don't know why, but for some reason there's an option to have a sticker here, and personally I don't see the reason for that because, well, they're gonna be covered up anyway, so what's really the point? And another downside I have with this is that I remember on the box it advertised reenacting your favorite moments from the show, but as you can see it's only based on one episode, so it would be cool if they had some other episodes that can be referenced so you can pick whatever your favorite episode is. I would have even settled on Band Geeks, but there's a lot of other episodes they could have picked. Like maybe Atlantis Square maybe the first episode, Chocolate Was Nuts, Life of Crime. There are a lot of iconic episodes they could have picked. And I'm not saying that Hello Bikini Bottom is a bad episode by any means. I quite enjoy it. But it would have been cool if it had more episodes to reference, so you can choose your favorite episode or even switch up the display a little bit. Next up, we have the Flying Dutchman ship, a set that I completely forgot to review on this channel, along with some at the very end, but that's because I saved them for this video. But all things considered, I think they did a pretty decent job. You can definitely tell what it is, and the detail is pretty okay for the price. We even get a SpongeBob pirate minifigure, which looks really cool. At this point, they never made another SpongeBob minifigure other than the standard one, so it's nice to have variety. The main downside I have with it is that there is a glaring omission. Even though this is the Flying Dutchman ship, there is no Flying Dutchman. And personally, I think that's a crime, especially since it doesn't make a lot of sense for SpongeBob to just be taking over the ship without the Dutchman. So yeah, another Flying Dutchman minifigure would have been nice. But unfortunately, we don't get one, probably because it's just easier to reuse the same minifigures that you have opposed to making new ones. Very recently, they released these figures that aren't based on any sort of set, but instead based on the main 5 characters. First off is SpongeBob. One thing I do want to bring up that I didn't bring up in the YouTube short, you do have 2 separate faces that you can put on. If I can find an example, I definitely will. I unfortunately threw away those other stickers because I don't think I'd really need them. But as a display piece, it looks pretty solid. You can definitely tell who this is. There are no holes on the back. That would have been appreciated, but I do get why they excluded it because you're not really supposed to look at it from the back. Also, this is a nitpick. I wish there was a white 1x2 of any kind to separate below the blue and white stripes, just to make them a little bit taller and just to add some color variety. But overall, this looks pretty good. Next up is Patrick Star. Patrick is kind of a hard character to translate into brick form, so I honestly respect them for what they have done. It's a little bulky around this side, but I think you're meant to be displaying it from the front. I do like the posability of the arms, but the downside is that they are very easy to come off. But if you want them to wave hello, then, or do this like yay stance, then you can definitely do that. Overall, I think they did a decent job. Next up in the figure line is Squidward Q Tentacles. If you've seen my YouTube short on this, you'd know that I'm not really a fan of how this turned out. Like, it looks alright, but unfortunately the proportions are just very off. Plus, it's kind of fragile too, because the body and the head are very easy to come off. So I think some Technic pins of some kind to hold it all together would have been very helpful. Also, the way everything is like balanced is just kind of off. Like, Squidward's head is big and his body's small, but honestly, his body's always small, so that's fine, but his legs are incredibly short. So I wish they made him a little taller. Also, I'm not a fan of how they did the arm tentacles because they look like knives. I'm just gonna be honest, they look like knives. They're pointy and they can poke somebody's eye out. So I don't really like it. Next on the shopping block is Cheapy the Cheapskate, aka Mr. Krabs. Honestly, for a brick-built version of like a roundest character, I think they could have done worse. I think they did a pretty decent job with what they had. I especially like the collar detail, and even though the claws are kind of finicky, I do appreciate the attempt. I also like the piece usage of the claw piece being used for the nose. It's not very accurate, but it is a nice use of the piece. And as you just saw, this is honestly one of my issues with the set. The legs are very easy to come off, which is odd because it actually fixed a complaint that I had with the Squidward set, which is adding Technic pins. Maybe if there was a way to have like a hole where these go and have it go through the body, perhaps that would have helped a lot more. Also, these are the wrong color. They're typically like a lighter brown, but a lot of sets have this mistake on them, so maybe it's just a thing I have to get used to. But overall, they did decent. And the last figure build is Sandy Cheeks. I think they did the best they could with Sandy, although there are some details missing, like the stripes on the arms, the little red circle on the boots, and obviously her helmet. The head is pretty boxy, but honestly, I don't know how else they could have done this. Though I wish the tail wasn't so flat, plus it's kind of finicky. It is very easy to come apart. And my last critique, because of the way the body is built, Sandy does not have a lot of posability in her arms. Her arms can only go halfway, so I wish there was a way they could have fixed that. And those are all the figure builds. Snap and Switch. Overall, I think this was a great idea, and they translated the characters pretty decently, all things considered. They definitely look great in a group, and because of that, I think it would have been cool to have a more expensive option where you get all of them in one set, because I'm gonna be honest, I can't really picture a lot of people like buying Mr. Krabs or like Sandy or, okay, maybe Squidward in like just standalone without SpongeBob. But at the same time, as a SpongeBob collector, I do like how these less represented characters are getting more of the spotlight. Because for a while, we only got SpongeBob and Patrick. So it's cool that the marketing for a lot of SpongeBob stuff is making more of a conscious effort to include more of the niche characters. I say niche and they're main characters, but I say niche when it comes to merchandise. So if you want to get these, I would recommend it. They are good display pieces for sure. One thing I almost forgot to mention about the figure builds is that I think they might be inspired by the Sanrio block builds, because on this channel I have reviewed some of the brick built characters from Sanrio, such as Tuxedo Sam and Cinema Roll. I'm not sure if that was intentional or if that was a coincidence, but I wouldn't be surprised if these got inspiration from those just to follow that trend. Now let's take a look at the rest of the build. The next smaller set is Goo Lagoon, which is the very first time the Goo Lagoon has ever been brick built. And this, just like Jellyfish Fields, is a pretty good display piece. Plus, since it's such a big area, I can actually forgive it. I actually understand why they made it so small compared to like the Chum Bucket or SpongeBob's house, for instance, which are so tiny that they can't even fit through the doors. Plus, it has quite a bit of play features. For instance, you can lay on the chair, kind of. Minifigure cannot bend his legs. Oh, speaking of the minifigure, he rips his pants, and I think that is really iconic. And I really like how they used a different face this time. They didn't have to do that. He can also land the towel, and the separation between the sand and the waves is also kind of finicky. You can also have SpongeBob hold the marshmallows. Let me see if I can do that real quick. He can kind of do it. It is a little tricky, but you can definitely have him lift the marshmallow weights. Maybe I did a bad job with it, but I don't know. I kind of struggled with it. And the last play feature, you can ride on a surfboard. This is the main play feature. The only downside is that it is very fragile, but I do appreciate the attempt. But overall, I do like this for similar reasons as why I like Jellyfish Fields. I might like this even more due to the play features. Even though not all of them work, the attempt was there and I madly respect that. And for the last smaller set, the Paddy Wagon. The first thing I want to mention, I do like how they give Patrick a new minifigure face, because we had the same Patrick figure for 2 sets, so it's nice to have variety. And you basically put him in here, and he go vroom. I'm actually really surprised on how well this works, because these aren't actually wheels. I expected this to be complete ass, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. And in terms of detail, I think they did a pretty good job with representing the Paddy Wagon like it is in the movie. Maybe I would have added like another sticker on the other side, so the KK shows up on both sides of the Paddy Wagon. I love the To Go sticker. Speaking of stickers, I don't like how the sesame seeds are one big sticker. I wish they either printed them on or just took them out, because as it stands, it just kind of looks ugly. I don't like it. It looks pretty shitty. The Paddy Wagon is nothing new. We have had a lot of brick-built Paddy Wagons, as I said in the YouTube shorts. But overall, I think they did a pretty good job, and this is a good, cheap way to get the Paddy Wagon. Now for the big sets. Yes, they are finally making big sets. And the first one is the Flying Dutchman ship. The SpongeBob minifigure is the same as the smaller Flying Dutchman build, but it adds a Patrick in his wearing more pirate attire. But as I said in the smaller Dutchman set, I think it is a crime, especially for the big set, that there is no Flying Dutchman. Like, come on, this is his ship. Give us the Dutchman. Also, one thing I do want to bring up, I ended up losing a bar piece because, no joke, I sneezed and I couldn't recover it when it fell down the studio setup, because I have like a lot of collectibles underneath the studio setup, but thankfully it doesn't take away too much from the build. Honestly, this has a lot of potential. This is definitely a great start, but it does have quite a bit of problems. For instance, I wish the color coding was a little bit better. It is mostly translucent green, which does make perfect sense, but I don't know. I wish there was more color variety, especially the portholes. I honestly would have made these all basically a solid green so you can easily see them, but instead it's only this one. Also, this is mainly a personal thing. This technically isn't inaccurate, but I would have made these like a darker green or like a darker brown so it's a little bit more accurate, because as it stands it kind of clashes. And my last critique, these are very easy to come off, so I wish they added like a Tatnik pin or something so they could better support these. And lastly, there is an open bottom, so you can do this. It is actually a light up ship, which I personally think is really cool. So despite my complaints, I think this did a pretty decent job, and if any of my critiques were fixed, I think it would have been perfect. Also, one thing I do want to say, I would highly recommend getting this at Burlington. Don't go to the well-played website like I did, lest you can drop an extra 40 bucks. Time for the second big set. Snap and Switch has finally gave us a bigger pineapple set. And honestly, I wish they just gave us this from the beginning. But as a build, it looks okay. It's not like a masterpiece, it's not like Area X, but I think you get your money's worth. Though this is the brick build pineapple to have his mat, and it does say ahoy. The door opens up too. which is really nice. And it even has a back. And as you can see, the chair fell apart on me because it has like a little swivel thing on here. And honestly, I wouldn't have done this because it's very easy to come off. Same with these. Also, one thing I do want to bring up, in the instructions, it had me build the chair like this, but it won't let me put it in because there was an obvious hinge piece right here. So because of this, I had to build it like this with like an extra row of studs. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I just wish they clarified that in the instructions. And you also get 2 minifigures. We have the SpongeBob from the original smaller pineapple set, and we have Patrick from basically any snap and switch set. I do want to say I'm not a fan of the way they printed SpongeBob here. It does look very off, and he does have eyelashes, but they're very hard to see. I think they printed it a little bit downwards on mistake. So maybe this is just an issue on my end. Also, speaking of minifigures, there is a very glaring admission from this. Gary. Why don't we have Gary? I would have settled on a brick-built Gary or like a plastic figure Gary, but there's no Gary. And Gary lives here, and that's even more of a glaring omission. And my last critique for this set, even though this takes a lot of inspiration from the Lego SpongeBob, unlike Lego SpongeBob, it is kind of hard to bend it properly. So you kind of have to figure it out manually. Otherwise, it's just gonna look like this. So that's kind of a shame. But overall, I would recommend this pineapple over the Five Below version. Plus, it's surprisingly cheap at Burlington. It's like only $16, though it makes me wish that they made bigger builds of like the entire con street, like Squidward's house and maybe even Patrick's house. I don't really know if they could really do a bigger Patrick's house because that one did a pretty decent job already, but I think a bigger Squidward's house would be pretty good. And for the final set, we finally have Goofy Goobers. Also, I'm starting to notice a pattern with all the big sets. Each of them have a steering wheel. I find that interesting because the Dutchman ship has a steering wheel, because the pineapple has a steering wheel, and spoiler alert, all 3 of them have SpongeBob and Patrick as the main figures. I'm sure that was just a coincidence, but I just thought that was interesting. I honestly have no complaints on the exterior. Okay, maybe one complaint. These stickers were kind of a bitch to put on, but that's like my only complaint. I think they did a really good job on the exterior. And the interior looks pretty cool too. I like the clock from the movie. I like how there's like a spinning stage. It is a little finicky, unfortunately, mostly because these are pretty big minifigures with a very small space. I know it's supposed to fit on both of them, but I think more space would have been necessary for it to do that. And one thing I find really cool are these. So you can easily play on the inside. And there's 2 signs, one that says eat responsibly. I find it very interesting how SpongeBob and Patrick are on here. Then there's the try our famous triple gooberberry sunrise. But the interior has quite a bit of detail. It has this piano, it has 2 seats, and it also has this seat. And there's a sign that says nut bar, but I'm not sure what area is referring to the nut bar, but that's a pretty minor complaint. Also, I just love the colors of this set. A lot of pastel pinks. As a matter of fact, I've been trying to make a sequel to my What If Lego Made a Comeback video, and I actually did build a Goofy Goobers, and I had like a similar color scheme. I'm not claiming they ripped me off because I haven't even shown this yet, but I do find it a very interesting coincidence how I was building my own Goofy Goobers with this similar of a layout, and all of a sudden Snap and Swish just makes it. I might even go back and take some inspiration from the set. Who knows? But honestly, I think this might be my favorite Snap and Switch set, especially the colors and how much they put into it. Plus, we've never had a brick-built Goofy Goobers, so they're actually bringing something new to the table. So that was my review of the rest of the Snap and Switch sets. They went from making mediocre builds of sets that should be bigger to doing their own thing and making sets that no other brick build company has ever done with SpongeBob. Of course, there's always room for improvement. There are a lot of finicky issues, and I wish there was more minifigure variety, but I think overall they are doing a pretty decent job. They have definitely improved over the first video that I've made. But what do you think of Snap and Switch? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Are you mixed on them? And comment which set you want to get for yourself. Let's start a discussion in the comments. And as always, it's all Sab from here.